The following content may include sensitive material. Audience discretion is advised.
On the day this picture was taken, it was a genuine pain in my soul. My soul was crying out. I had nothing left. My life made no sense at all. My mother-in-law, at the time, she was a mother of the spirits, and at that point, she was already looking after our minds spiritually. I began to wear the garments, and that's when I started, in body and spirit, to receive and dedicate myself to the entities. I began to sacrifice, and I had no problem sacrificing. Every month I sacrificed money and went to the waterfalls, went to the woods.
I was always there, sacrificing together with them. My household really served them. We gave with all our strength. Absolutely everything they said, we did. But at home, we didn't see any results. Because our life was completely destroyed. It was a life where my parents were always drinking, always arguing. I remember I had anxiety attacks, and I would consult the spirits saying, "I'm crying. Sometimes I cry and I don't even know why." And they would say, "It will pass." But they never gave me a solution.
Materially, we had everything. We traveled, we had material goods, but we had no peace. It simply didn't exist. We didn't sleep. We had no tranquility at home.
They made us believe that if things were bad with them, it could be even worse without them. So we stayed. We ended up being tied down.
It was a prison.
Convinced it would be much worse if we weren't with them, because they said they cared for us and were looking after our minds. Even though we had material things, it was a life of frustration. My mom was depressed, my parents were fighting. It was a completely destroyed life.
It reached the point where our family was undone. Everyone was there, but there was no longer a family. I no longer had a relationship of husband and wife with my husband. My daughter was already completely distant. My son had left home because we got involved with drugs. We started taking drugs inside the house, and my ex-husband would lock himself in the bedroom. The house ended up just being two people using drugs.
My parents started using drugs, so they lost control. My father's aggression grew even worse towards my mother. She was emotionally blind, unable to control anything anymore. It reached a point where I turned to her and said, "Let's leave. He's going to kill you. Let's go. Let's get out of here." And at the first opportunity, when my father locked himself in the room, we left with the clothes on our backs and didn't look back.
I was constantly in tears. I had anxiety attacks. I had those crying fits where I would only stop when I started hyperventilating, almost feeling ill. Only then I would manage to stop crying.
You took medication.
I took antidepressants, anxiolytics. I even took heavy sleeping pills. 2-3 tablets just to be able to sleep. The depression was very severe. For a long time, it was masked by drug use. Because as long as I was fueling myself with drugs, I could keep going. When we moved out and things got calmer, I remember most of the time I was at home, in bed. It was really serious. After a while, I got tired. I stopped taking the medication, went back to using drugs, started drinking, and during that time, when she came back home, what would often happen? I stole from her because I wasn't working anymore. Many times the depression kept me from working, and I had ended up getting fired. I had no money for drugs. no money for food. Many times she would come home on payday and hide her money.
When I realized it was my mom who had stolen the money, it was my biggest disappointment. Later, when I got into a relationship, the person I was with used to attend the church, but he left. I never had any contact with church, faith, or any of that. So curiosity began to grow. My first contact with faith was during the pandemic. Through the radio, the TV programs, that's when the services started airing more frequently, and I began to listen. I remember listening to Bishop Renato and Mrs. Chris speaking about the love therapy, speaking exactly about the things I had never seen in my life, about marriage, about relationships. I'd never seen that in my home, never in my family. It was as if my eyes had been opened. All that I had looked for my whole life, God gave me a free sample in the first meeting. I left so happy. I thought, I need to go back. The next week, I said, I need to get baptized. I had already left everything behind. It wasn't hard for me to obey because I was used to sacrificing. I had watched my family sacrifice for years, but on the wrong altar. So, everything the altar said, everything the pastor said, I did. After 2 weeks, I was baptized. And after 3 months, I received the Holy Spirit. That's when my battle began, because some weeks after receiving the Holy Spirit, my mom called me with a knife to her throat because she had found out I was attending the church.
I remember that day perfectly. I was deeply depressed. Evil spoke in my mind, saying I was beyond hope, that the only solution was death, that I had lost my marriage, my children. And when she had told me that, I thought, that's it. I had already cut myself before. I got a knife and said, if you do not leave that church now, I'm going to kill myself. It could be any church except the Universal Church.
Why?
Because I didn't like Bishop Macedo. I thought he was the Antichrist. She said a few words. I don't even remember what. Then one day she insisted for me to go with her, and her insistence caught my attention. I thought, fine, I would go with her. But then I started visiting other churches, other denominations, thinking I will find a good church and take her out of the Universal Church. I spent days searching things online.
Sometimes she would go to the service, and then at night she'd send me fake news. I thought, all right, God, something's working. At least she's going.
For a year, I went to the church to try and take my daughter out of there. But there was one day where I truly understood the word. It entered in me in a way when I realized I needed to surrender. I arrived, listened to the pastor, and understood that I needed to surrender. I heard about the Holy Spirit. And if I didn't understand that I need to surrender and have this encounter with God, it would only be a matter of time for me to end up back in the hell that I came from. By then, I had already stopped doing some things, and I felt a small peace, but I realized I could receive so much more. So I began seeking. I left everything on the altar. The drugs, my desire to use drugs, my packs of cigarettes. I left the bag of medication, antidepressants, sleeping pills, everything. I left it on the altar. Then came the campaign of Israel, where I surrendered. I truly surrendered. I poured myself out on the altar and spoke to God. I was sincere. I told him I need to surrender, to change my spirit, that I need to receive his spirit because the person I was needed to be transformed. I put all my strength and everything I had believed in on that altar. And it was so powerful. That moment when I felt God's embrace, I felt like a child of God, where I had always felt like an orphan. Suddenly, I felt like his child for the first time. I wanted to leave the church telling everyone that I was a child of God and that everything I had lived for 48 years no longer existed, that I now belonged to something much greater. So when it came to saving a soul, I gave everything because I know what that soul is going through. When I see someone depressed, someone wanting to die, I know exactly what they're feeling.
Today, I see a transformed woman, a woman who once wished to die, now has joy in bringing life to others. She's always smiling, and it's not forced. On the contrary, it's the joy of the Holy Spirit. She knows how special she is for me because I see the fruit of the Holy Spirit in her.
I resolved everything on the altar. I am a fruit of the altar. Everything I seek for today, I don't look to people, I look to the altar because that's where my strength comes from.